嗨，朋友大家好，欢迎大家收看《ITA看世界，一起看世界》，我是主持人老外。那今天非常的开心，邀请到了 Rana 跟我一起进行这一次的专访。
各位观众朋友，大家好，我是 Rana。
是的，时节来到6、7月份，对我们台湾的原住民族人来说是丰收的季节。那对于我们毛利族人来说呢，也是一个丰收的季节哦。怎么说？因为呢，这个 Matariki 这个昴宿星团出现的时候呢，对我们毛利族人而言，也意味着新年的到来。是
的，没错，在这个时候呢，其实，在纽西兰的毛利族人呢，他们都会举办文化相关的活动呢，一起来庆祝这个节日。
那其实从2018年开始呢，纽西兰商工办事处也第一次和我们的原民会合作举办了这个毛利新年节的活动，而且呢是把这个仪式搬到我们台湾来进行。那透过系列性的活动呢，让台湾的原住民族人了解我们毛利族人的这个文化，而且是非常美丽的文化。那今天我们把摄影的这个棚子拉到了阳明山来进行，也就是今年举办 Matariki 的这个活动现场。而在这边，我们也很荣幸邀请到2位来宾等等，要跟我们分享这一次美好的文化节的活动。首先，第一位为大家邀请到的是我们纽西兰商工办事处的涂木仪代表。
你好 ，Kia ora， 我的名字是 Moira， 我是纽西兰的代表。
是的，欢迎我们代表。紧接着第2位为大家邀请到的是我们原民会的副主委Iwan Nawi副主委。
Kana ita masai Iwan Nawi yaku， 原民会副主委。
好的，欢迎2位来宾。稍后呢，就要来跟我们好好的分享我们的毛利新年节当中的意义跟文化，也要谈谈我们台牛之间这个深厚的情谊啊！欢迎2位。那其实呢，从一开始我们就有讲到，2018年开始呢，纽办就跟我们的原民会合作。每年都会举办这个毛利新年节的庆祝活动，而这个活动呢，除了在纽西兰当地会举办之外，那其实这一次呢，在台湾能举办这个活动，可以对我们来说，对台湾的毛利人来说，也是一个非常重要的一个意义跟意涵。那这当中，对我们台湾的原住民也有很重要的意义哦。
对，没错，相信大家一定也很好奇呢，为什么纽西兰商工办事处会想要在台湾呢举办属于毛利人的节日 ？So from 2018, the NZCIO and cooperated with CIP to hold Matariki Festival every year. Since 2018, so actually this event became the first Maori festival that took place in Taiwan, except Australia and of course New Zealand. So I want to ask Moira, what is the origin and goals of this event?
So in 2018, we were having a conversation in our office in NZCIO, and we were looking for a way to explain to Taiwanese people a little bit more about New Zealand, who New Zealanders are, what we are. And we realised that Matariki, which is an important element of the Māori calendar, the celebration of the New Year, is something that is becoming more widely celebrated in New Zealand. So Māori are regaining their tikanga and their knowledge and their practice around Matariki. And in many places in New Zealand and overseas, people are now using Matariki as the time to talk about New Zealand, who we are as New Zealanders. And we thought that would work really well in Taiwan. So we put together a plan, and we were able to secure some support both from our people in Wellington but also from some commercial sponsors, and we were very pleased that CIP were happy to support us too, to celebrate Matariki or Māori New Year in Taiwan. And for us it's really appropriate because the theme of Matariki is to look back on what you've achieved in the past, then to come together as a community with our friends here, and then look forward to the future and what we can achieve together. So it's a really wonderful chance to reflect.
OK， 所以这边代表是说呢，其实毛利新年节呢是在对毛利族人来说是在他们的这个1年当中是非常重要的一个节日。那希望那时候会合作是希望把这个文化带到台湾，让更多人可以认识毛利族的文化。对，那其实这个节日呢，不只是回顾过去的这个就是回顾过去，也是一个展望未来的一个时机。对，那是很高兴，其实这个日子是很棒的。
是的，那刚刚代表也有回应到。那再请问一下副主委，那我们当初为什么会想要跟纽办举办这样的活动？当初的契机又是什么？
这边我要首先非常肯定我们纽办，特别是我们土代表上任以后，特别重视纽西兰毛利族跟台湾原住民族的关系。那事实上，我们在这几年的媒体或者是一些主流社会，都慢慢有发现，台湾原住民族跟纽西兰毛利族是有非常深远的关系。我们在语言上、文化上都非常亲近，所以有一个南岛语族这个概念，让我们把两边的关系拉得更近。所以，我们如果能够在台湾这块土地，一起举办我们纽西兰毛利族的新年，是意义非常深远的。这个可以把我们整个关系拉得更接近。那同时，也表达了就是两个国家对自己的原住民族的一种文化上的一个尊重。
是认识彼此的文化，那也让我们了解到，其实我们台湾的原住民族跟我们纽西兰的毛利族人，其实大家都是属于南岛语族，那都流着类似的血缘。那我们也看到了很多的这个文化在里头，而且就很多的研究去显示，其实我们台湾是整个南岛语族很重要的一个节点。那其实呢，在这一次的文化的过程当中，大家也一定很好奇这个 Matariki 毛利的新年节的由来，以及我们毛利族人到底会有哪些的庆祝活动。所以呢，在今天在稍早的时候，我们已经采访到了我们的这个毛利族的朋友，来为我们进行这个夯哦，这个传统的这个烹饪的这个仪式跟活动。那等等，我们就来稍后来看一下这个美好的画面。
Okay, kia ora everybody. My name is Bernie. 我是毛利人在纽西兰。Hangi is a traditional Maori cooking process, usually done for meetings with family or friends or relations, for either weddings or gatherings or funerals. So usually done for when there are big groups of people. It takes quite a while to make one of these meals. So initially we have some rocks, which are called hangi stones, and we light a large fire and we get the stones very, very hot. It takes maybe 2 or 3 hours to make the stones really hot. And once the stones are hot enough, we place them into a pit in the ground. And once they're in the ground, we put the food on top, usually with the meat. Meat goes on top, and then the vegetables above that. And then we cover it all over again, carefully so that the dirt doesn't get in. Then what we do is, once we cover it over carefully with cloth, we cover it again with the soil and we bury it, and it will stay like that for around 2 hours and cook under the ground, which is like a pressure cooker under the ground. So the steam from the vegetables and the water we add will circulate through the food and cook the food, and then once it falls back down onto the hot stones, it circulates again, turns into steam. So the food comes up after 2 hours and it tastes really great. Traditionally, the food we use for hangi is chicken or pork, but today we're very lucky. We got lamb, leg of lamb, which is a high-end cut of meat. Very tasty. So we've got a leg of lamb here, which is probably like 8 of those. We've got about 8 chickens and some other offcuts of lamb. And we've got some stuffing, which is like a traditional bread and herb filling. And over here we have the normal vegetables, which are potatoes and pumpkin with some cabbage. The vegetables go on top because they take the less time to cook. So the heavy things go on the bottom so that the heat from the rocks will cook them thoroughly before we uncover the food. I believe hangi is a traditional Austronesian style of cooking. So it's throughout the Pacific. They use the style, even Samoa, Hawaii, Tonga, and even Austronesia with the Papua New Guinea people. They call it umu. Plus maybe 1 or 2 tribes use the word hangi as well. So I think we inherited the process on our way after we left Taiwan, maybe 5,000 years ago, and we picked it up on our way to New Zealand as a great way of cooking for large groups of people. And mata being eyes, and riki is short for ariki, which is like God. So Matariki means the eyes of God. So. I can't say exactly, but there's the god of cultivation, god of the wind, god of fishing, god of the ocean, and also there's one Matariki star as well. Most astronomers back then believed there were only 7 stars, but the Māori knew there were 9. So when it was found out that when New Zealand was colonized, the Māori said there are 9 stars in that system. A lot of colonizers didn't believe them. They thought there was only 7. So for the Matariki, it's held around the midwinter season, usually around mid-July, and it's when the star cluster Pleiades comes up just before sunrise. And when that arises, it's a time for families to remember the past year, to celebrate what's happened over that year, and for families to plan for the upcoming year. Also, when the tohunga or the experts look at the Pleiades at night time, in the morning before the sunrise, they can read the stars and consider how the year is going to go, depending on how the constellation looks. So it can predict either it's going to be a good year for hunting and fishing or growing crops, or a dry year for growing. So Matariki is very important for the Māori.
好的，其实，在刚刚呢，我们已经看到了这个hangi的整个的制作的过程跟流程，让我觉得也非常的亲近。因为其实，在我们阿美族的这个传统的美食里头，其实就以花莲的阿美族人来说，他们就有类似的手法，像是这个大家非常熟悉的这个石头火锅，就是先会以这种石头把它烧热的一个状况，然后把它丢进锅子里，或者是我们的这个槟榔鞘里头，然后去煮鱼汤，让我觉得非常的熟悉。
对，是不是很亲切？
很亲切，感觉就像我们是家里人自己在做餐点一样。
那其实呢，刚才在影片当中呢 ，Bernie 也有提到哦，不只是纽西兰哦，其实像萨摩亚、巴布亚纽几内亚以及这个东加等等的太平洋岛国，他们其实也有像hangi这样子的这个传统的烹煮的方式。对，这是他们共享的一个文化。对，是很特别的。对 ，So I would like to ask Moira more about the detail, maybe about the hangi and the origin or the significance of Matariki Festival, especially to the Maori people.
Well, I'll start with the significance of Matariki. So Matariki is the point where the stars known as the Pleiades constellation in the northern hemisphere rise in the sky. And for Māori, when those stars disappear, that is time for them to harvest. And when Matariki rises, that's a time for them to come together as a community. And as I said earlier, look back on the past year, reflect on their experiences together, join together as a community, and then look forward to the future. So for them, it's an important part of the calendar and a really significant part of how they join themselves together. In terms of the hangi, for Matariki, an important part of that process is food, kai, and eating together and sharing the bounty of the harvest. And for them, their traditional way of cooking was through a hangi. So we did a hangi outside, or laid down a hangi outside earlier on today, and you will have seen that it's cooked in the ground, in meat and vegetables. That's how Māori traditionally cooked in New Zealand. And I know that there are very many other practices, and you referred to some of them, of cooking in the earth or above the earth. But for Māori, they traditionally cooked in the earth or in geothermal places, so where there is the hot water and steam coming out of the earth. Yeah.
So 刚才呢，代表呢就有提到说哈， 就是这个Matariki 呢，是族人就是聚集的一个日子，回顾过去，也是展望未来的日子。对，然后呢，他也Moira 刚也提到说 ，Hangi 呢其实也是就是共享食物的一个概念。对对，
分享的一种
对分享，在那个时候呢，他们就会做这个传统的这个在地底下的这个 honey， 就是为了要就是共享食物的概念这样子。是
共享食物。那其实这边也要问一下副主委，其实毛利族的文化跟我们台湾的原住民很多的文化也有很多的类似的点，跟相关的一些文化在里头，是吧？
是没有错。其实真的每一次听到他们讲他们的文化的时候，我们都有一种同感了哈，因为我们的文化确实跟他们真的太接近了。就这个他们的毛利新年的意义来说，对我们每一个民族的这个节日也都是相同的意义了哈。比如说我是赛德克族，对我们的那个传统节庆就是收获节，这个收获节我们定在12月31号，这个也是家人比较能够团聚的一个时间，哈，然后分享所有我们带进来的食物，好，过去传统我们有叫那个 halama， 就有点像阿密斯的那个 hahak， 我们也会做我们的红豆糯米饭，好，那还有所有山上可以猎到的猎物叫 zamat， 好，那有这一些，还有我们的西诺巴莱小米酒，这样一年，好。一方面收获，一方面我们要展望未来。其实那个意义真的是大同小异。对，
是的。那今天其实呢，在这个非常重要的场合，我相信呢，我们代表应该也会很想要认识我们更多台湾原住民族相关的，不管是食物方面，或者是我们跟祖灵沟通很重要的一个桥梁，就是刚刚我们副主委有讲到的小米酒。对，这对我们原住民来说，真的是一个非常重要的一个连结啦，我们透过这样的食材跟这个或者是交流来进行这么美好的一个互动。那其实呢，我们也刚刚也讲到说，就是在未来我们纽办呢还会是否会继续进行相关的这种交流活动，让我们持续的来进行。我们相信呢，就是不管是台湾的原住民族人，或者是我们就纽西兰的毛利族人，也都会有很多的这个期待。
对，相信观众朋友一定也想参加更多像这样子的文化活动。So, Moira, in the future, will the NZCIO and the CIP will cooperate to hold more cultural activities such as Matariki Festival in the future?
So I think for NZCIO, Matariki is now the main time during the year when we celebrate New Zealand and what New Zealand culture is in Taiwan. So we will continue, or we intend to continue every year, holding an event which celebrates who New Zealand is and helps explain to Taiwanese people, to our Indigenous friends, but to all Taiwanese people, what it is that makes New Zealand different and special. We also work alongside CIP in a number of contexts, both cultural and in the economic space, to strengthen our Māori and Indigenous links. And so we will also continue to be happy to support CIP in events that they run, like the Palima Festival, which is an amazing event and which we've had a number of New Zealand artists come up to and participate in. So I certainly expect that we'll see lots of events both from NZCIO but also from CIP that we join together to work on, and some that we will do jointly together as well.
Okay. 那刚刚代表呢是希望呢透过这个毛利新年节可以让就是传达就是分享文化的这个讯息呢，然后其实纽办这边其实已经跟原民会就是合作了很多这个活动，然后也有双方的这个原住民族人其实都有做很多文化上面的交流，当然也有除了文化也有经贸上面的合作，对。那之后呢，每年也是会继续办这个 Matariki 的这个节日。
是我相信呢，对台湾的原住民族的，不管是青年或者是我们中壮年人来说，也是一个很棒的经验，也是一个很重要的交流。那这里其实原民会，我相信也有不断的在努力，在付出，让我们台湾的更多的人去认识毛利的文化。那在这里，副主委，原民会这里呢有没有相关的透过这样子的活动，想要跟我们台湾的原住民族人传达什么样的讯息出来？
一个刚刚我们最一开始我们传达有一个南岛语族这个概念，让他们更认识我们很多远房的亲戚在哪里，然后我们有很多语言文化相同的民族在什么地方。我觉得今天透过这样的一个新年毛利族的新年节，我相信大概原住民社会恐怕也都是很少听过哈。但我想只要我们纽办图代表能够也继续带领我们一起可以把这个活动可以再扩大，也许可以把这个效益可以再扩张出去，让更多的人，不只是原住民族，还有我们台湾的每一个社会都能够认识到这个纽西兰其实他们有一个很棒的民族叫毛利民族。
是的，那我相信呢，在这一次的活动在台湾在举办呢，可以给我们很多的原住民族的朋友好好的来认识一下。那有这样的活动，当然也让我们去认识到不同的族群文化的美，也让我们加深了这个文化当中的这个认识。那我们等等先休息一下，稍后再回到我们节目的现场。